Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for Renaissance Periodization. Our training modality video for today is about supersets. Hey, doesn't that sound super? Anyway, what the hell are supersets? There are actually two types of supersets. We're only talking about one here. There is a type of superset called an antagonist muscle superset or an unrelated muscle superset where you do muscles one set for a group of muscles, and then your next set, supersetted with no rest between, is for an intentionally uninvolved set of muscles. So for example, you do your chest and triceps with close grip bench, and then immediately you go into inverted rows and you do your back and biceps with rows. That's a superset, yes, but it's not the kind we're talking about here. Those are antagonistic or unrelated supersets. They're designed to maximize how much total work you get in a minimum time in the gym. They're not ideal for hypertrophy because if you do close grip work and then you do right after your back work, a lot of times, especially if you're bigger and stronger, if you don't rest between sets, the systemic fatigue is so massive, it prevents you from doing a lot of good work on whatever that second set is, that second exercise, and then maybe it's not ideal. Great time saver, so a lot of you can still use it, but since this is like really advanced hypertrophy stuff, we're only talking about today agonist supersets. That is, you do an isolation movement for the target muscle, let's say skull crushers for triceps, and then right after you do a movement that is compound but is still limited by the triceps, something like an overhead dumbbell press or something like that. So skull crushers, put the bar down, get up, overhead dumbbell press. Okay, that way your triceps get a decent stimulus in that first exercise, but then when they are already fatigued, close to failure, they are the limiting factor. You do a compound exercise. It used to be that overhead dumbbell presses are for front delts, good stimulus, and triceps, great stimulus. But now because your triceps enter that exercise as almost dead and your front delts enter completely fresh, more or less, every single of the 5 to 10 reps you'll grind out of those dumbbell presses will be your triceps are close to failure, close to failure, close to failure. And we know from tons of research and theory that if we train very close to failure more, that magnifies the stimulus a ton. It essentially lets us, these agonist supersets, take a muscle and train it with an isolation and a compound, but the effect is like double the isolation. Really awesome way to use compounds to extra train that muscle that we want. So what you do is a set for whatever isolation muscles you want, and then with no rest generally, or as long as it takes transition exercises, do a compound exercise in which that muscle is involved and is way, way, way ideally the limiting factor. What are the upsides to training? This is, of course, afterwards. So skull crushers, dumbbell press, rest a normal amount of time, and then hit it again. Skull crushers, no rest, dumbbell press, rest normal, and then go again. Here are the upsides. First of all, you can get an amazing stimulus, especially for muscles that generally have compound exercises that can train them really well and maybe don't respond as much to isolation movement. So for example, if you do lying or seated hamstring curls very well on a good machine, that hits the hamstrings, even though it's isolation, so well, motherfucker, you don't need any supersets. You're fucking good. 5 sets of that shit by itself is going to fry you the fuck up. However, some people get into a situation where, let's say for triceps, they do pushdowns till they're blue in the face. But what they really like to do is dips, because dips fuck their triceps up like crazy. But they also fuck up their chest and their front delts. It's a great all-around pushing exercise. What they can do, especially if they're really strong, is take that not so ideal tricep pushdown and use it not so much to stimulate growth on its own, but to pre-fatigue the triceps so that when you switch to something like dips afterwards, your triceps are by far the limiting factor. They're closer to failure the entire time, and then they get most of the effort. Because you think your pecs will eventually turn on to try to help you do as many dips as possible, but they only get to be active for a few seconds until you fail completely. Your triceps are close to failure that entire time, which is a really, really big deal. Because supersets, well, eliminate a whole thing of rest, they can actually save you some time. Generally, you do lots of them to pound the volume, so it's not a specific time saver, but it's certainly less time than doing all the straight sets and then doing all the compound sets later. On that second movement, on that compound movement, supersets can allow you to have an unbelievable mind-muscle connection. For example, if you're using dips and you feel the tricep pretty well, but you'd really like more out of your dips, pre-exhausting your triceps with something like pushdowns can, as soon as you start doing dips, you go, holy shit, I feel only my triceps, which can be a really awesome thing if mind-muscle connection is a problem for you. And lastly, you can use these in a sandwich style, which means what? You do compound heavy work for that muscle. So for example, let's say weighted dips or heavy skull crushers for triceps. Check. Then, because the compound heavy work is done and the fast twitch fibers are fatigued, we need to pound in the rest of the work. Then you can go to pushdowns, supersetted with something like flat dumbbell press. Pushdown superset with flat dumbbell press allows you to get the heavy work in, because the big critique against supersets is if you do the isolation movement first, you kind of pre-exhaust your muscles, and then you're not going to be able to do the compound with much load. If you do a compound first, but as its own exercise, you check that box. Then a superset after lets you check both the heavy, high tension, low rep box and the metabolite super high rep box at the same time. Minimum amount of total effort, maximum amount of stimulus. Supersets are the shit. They're especially good if a muscle just won't fucking grow. And not only will it not grow, but the isolation movements you're using with it, you do them and you finish them and you're like, I guess I feel a bit of a pump. I guess I feel some tension, but I'm really not pushing my muscle to the limits. If you combine that isolation movement and intelligently use a compound after that still hits that muscle group that you were targeting, you can get way more stimulus and be like, holy fuck, I don't know what I would do if not for these supersets. There are downsides, of course, as with everything. If you can't check the 4-factor rest boxes before that compound shows up, it's not a good idea. So somebody could say like, okay, well, let's see, isolation. If I'm doing lat prayers, I can do a whole set of lat prayers and then a set of pull downs, and it'll be an awesome superset. Maybe. But for some people, lat prayer is such a huge range of motion for such a large group of muscles that after you finish a set of lat prayers, you're like, it doesn't feel like an isolation. It feels like you did some fucking work. If you do pull downs right after, you're just so tired. The set of pull downs is mostly junk volume. So the good thing about isolation supersets is you generally start out with an isolation movement, but if that isolation movement is so hardcore for you that afterwards you need to rest a really long time to do the compounded benefit, it's probably not a good idea. So this is not an end-all be-all. It has to be that the muscle you're targeting generally recovers quite quickly and doesn't tax your systemic abilities at all. The cool thing is we use supersets precisely for muscles that are struggling to develop, and oftentimes those same muscles, they just barely do hardly shit at all, so it doesn't even make you that tired, right? A last set of downsides. This is a very sort of very insightful, just patting myself on my back, a little bit more of a thoughtful biomechanics-related critique. Research has confirmed that if you pre-exhaust your triceps with isolations and then you do a compound pushing move in which there's really only 2 degrees of freedom, elbow and shoulder, okay, then what ends up happening is if your triceps are really tired, but you're still pushing the bar, your pecs are actually called upon more to contract than your triceps are, and they end up getting a good stimulus, an even better stimulus than your triceps. Hold the fuck up. Like, we didn't do all those skull crushers to get into the bench and have our chest take over and get the biggest effect. We want our triceps to take over. How the fuck do you do that? Well, if you have only 2 degrees of freedom, shoulder, elbow, then if your triceps are or like, let's say chemically, we just turned them off, like we just deadened the nerves for a while, just with your pecs alone, you can do a close grip bench. No problem. Because the pecs bring this joint here, and that's actually the only thing going on. 2 degrees of freedom means really just one thing happening, right? It's like an extension and this flexion happening at the same time, and either muscle can be taken over, no problem. So if your triceps are too tired, your pecs take over, it violates the whole purpose because your triceps aren't even pushing close to failure. Your pecs are like, hey, we got this. Triceps are like, sweet, take over. I'm done anyway. I'm tired from the isolation before. No bueno. We want an extra degree of freedom. So here's the deal. Instead, so you do some push downs. Don't go lying down and do close grip bench. Try this instead. Try dumbbell press. Because here's the thing. How the fuck are you supposed to dumbbell press with just your pecs if your triceps are so fucking weak they don't do anything? Watch this. I try to bench only with my pecs. Ready? My triceps have to turn on to do this. I'll just knock the dumbbells in. And guess what? Your triceps are already tired. And now they have to turn on to extend your hands. And because they have to do it, your chest is only playing a supporting role. Now we're back in that ideal version of supersets where your chest is like, hey, I'm going to help you as much as you can, triceps, to cross the finish line. And the triceps are like, fuck, I had to do this shit myself. And they're going to be going super close to failure the entire time. And your ability to press those dumbbells will be limited by your triceps. They will be the ones that lead to the failure. They will be the ones that get the most stimulus. Similar idea, let's say you do leg extensions for your quads, and then you go into the leg press. Well, yeah, it can kind of work as a pre-exhaust. However, leg press, again, there's just hip joint, knee joint. That's really the only thing that's involved. You can have completely deactivated quads and still do the entire leg pressing motion, no problem, with your glutes. So if your quads are tired, your glutes just take over and dick happens. And now you have a better glute pump than quad pump. And you're like, fuck, I think I'm doing something wrong. So a better exercise is if you do leg extensions pretty close to failure as the first set and a superset, the isolation, what do you do after? I would say a good idea is to get into the squat. Because again, if you only use your glutes in the squat and not your quads, okay, here's your femur, here's your upper body, you're going to be down here. If you only use your glutes, you're just going to fall backwards. This part here, to extend your knee, has to be your quads. There's no other way out of it. So if you do a crap load of leg extensions and then you run over to the squat rack or Smith machine or something, you can't possibly just use your glutes. It's impossible. You have to actually use your quads. Then they're a limiting factor. Then they get the most benefit. All right? So give this some thought. If you have any questions, put them in the comments below. If you absolutely love what I'm saying, subscribe. If you really love what I'm saying, just send me money, please. Look at how thin I've gotten. I can't even afford to eat anymore. See you guys next time.